So we've been working our way through some starting Gloomhaven tactics, looking to build that tactical list, points to consider without giving away any spoilers. And I believe in all of the vlogs that I'm pushing up here to my channel regarding Gloomhaven, so much of the game, yes, tactical combat, amazing. Leveling up your characters, amazing. But for me, equally, what's intriguing about the game is unlocking new characters, experiencing the story, and navigating dungeons that literally affect the world. So I am going to be avoiding that completely. I want you to discover that. You need to discover that as a player. I'm not going to get into specific tactics for fighting specific dungeons. That's the unlock. You're going to have to figure that out. But we can talk about tactics to keep in mind, points to keep in mind, things to navigate as you push your way through the game. Looking on the logistics side for a moment, setting things up, executing the dungeon aspect of it, going back to Gloomhaven, the town, and generally the party maintenance, what happens from setup to breakdown in the game. That's what I want to share with you, how I'm navigating that, because one of the two main questions about Gloomhaven that I encounter and that I see online are, first, replayability, and we looked at that, and second, I'm intrigued by Gloomhaven. I really am, but what's the setup time? What's the breakdown time? How intense is it? Is this a game? I mean, the box is massive. Is this a game that I can bring to the gaming club, set up and play in a reasonable order? Now, I'm not coming from the perspective of a broken token organizer or some sort of aftermarket organizer for the box that slips in. They have their place. I know a number of people use them. It certainly makes things a little bit easier on there, but this is a question that you have to answer for yourself. Roughly $100 USD for a game and $100 for a token organizer depends. Really depends on there. I don't utilize it. My box setup is the plastic insert for the cards and the stands. I have Ziploc bags for the various monsters and Ziploc bags labeled for the various tokens and the terrain and all the little bits and pieces of cardboard in there. It feels a lot like Magic Realm. That kind of goes on top with the tiles and the books ready to go. So what that means is I do have an extra setup step, and I'll share with you how I navigate that utilizing the box. So let's look at setup from the perspective of an adventure. I would say it takes on average about 15 minutes or so setup time. Once you have your monsters pulled and your tiles and your tokens pulled and ready to go, actually assembling it and checking, okay, do I put a monster here? If there's 2 players or 3 players or 4, is it a regular? Is it an elite? Putting down some traps, putting down some dungeon furniture on there, assembling the tiles. There is a layer of setup. That's the first layer. The second layer of setup, of course, is then taking the monster dashboards. These are inserts that go into a sleeve that show the abilities and the life points on there. You build the monster decks, you pull them from the main box, and you're ready to go. So there's about 15 minutes or so. And that's after once you become familiar with the steps internally, your own checklist to set up a scenario. Is that bad on there? I think that's somewhat reasonable. Certainly it's intimidating. You know, the first time you open the box and you're punching out all the tokens and tiles, you're like, okay, on the one hand, this is awesome. More cardboard, awesome. But this is a little bit crazy. This is a little bit intense. What I would say in Gloomhaven's defense, if it seems a little overwhelming, you're not utilizing all of these components at once. And again, no spoilers. The content in the game, the quests, the exploration is massive. Honestly, it feels the best reference I can give it. Some of the most epic D&D, Dungeons & Dragons campaigns that I've played over the years. One in Kryn, another one in the Forgotten Realms, where literally we played like 9 months to a year, almost every week, missing a little bit here and there for holidays and vacations, but playing a massive game. That's what Gloomhaven is. So a lot of these components you're going to encounter at different times. You're not utilizing everything in one setup. So it's not quite as intimidating as it looks. I think that's reasonable. How long do the missions play? This is the hard part. So of course the question is, Fritz, if it takes about 15 minutes to set up, obviously breakdown's going to be a little bit easier. If a gaming session is 3 hours at the local club, or you're meeting with your buddies, how many can we reasonably get in a single session? That's a little bit harder to answer simply because, are you playing with 2 players? Are you playing with 3 or 4? The more players, on the one hand, it's quicker to clean through the dungeon, so to speak. But on the other hand, now you have some coordination. You have more coordination, more layers that you have to figure out. And what I do find tactically with the line's kind of 3 or 4 players, the more players that you have, Gloomhaven, there are a lot of decisions to be made. You're in the dungeon, even the ones that don't utilize a timer. When the end conditions are met, you either win or lose, and your loot is your loot. And playing with 2 characters, you can play with 1 character. I have done it solo. It switches the balance a little bit. I won't say it's impossible, but playing with 2 characters means there are some dungeons, again, no spoilers, where you're not going to be able to grab all the loot. And what you find is if you have 3 or 4 characters, and I think the game really excels at 4, it wants to play at 4, it's a lot of fun, the interaction, the strategizing with 4. The challenge here I see with 4 characters is, yes, we can kill things much, much faster, even if there's more monsters deployed and you're taking some regular monsters, turning them into gold elites, things like that. But by chewing through the monsters more in the end mission, you almost want to slow things down so everyone can move and get a share of the loot. There are some dungeons where the loot is spread out enough that with 2 players, you're not going to be able to grab it all. You're not. So you need to kind of make some decisions. Usually it's the chest and the chest rewards, as opposed to the silver or gold tokens to multiply at the end of the game on there. So the play, that's going to determine how long the mission plays. Some missions are longer than others. And then, of course, just internally, which is so much big part of the game, fun part of the game, you strategizing, talking back and forth and deciding, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it each and every turn? That I can't say. Certainly it gets a little bit easier. The mechanics of the shopping, leveling up, road events, city events, those are cards that just kind of sit in the box, and every now and then you add to them or you take them away. The decks aren't really changing that much all the time. So I find once they're set and you're good to go, you just pull them out, put them away. Now, my it's not so much a storage solution because I do have everything in Ziploc bags. What I did was take a very thin sheet of foam, and I laid that on the inside of the top of the box and cut out and made some little compartments with my X-Acto knife, basically setting little squares that I can set up at the beginning using the top of the box, put in there the tokens that we're going to need for the mission, the terrain, the life, the money, all those things I lay out, I take them out to set up. I do that if we have time to play a couple of missions, because admittedly my setup system does slow things down a little bit. All the condition tokens, I have to look in the bags. If, again, 1 mission, that's fine. But if I think we're going to get in 2 or 3, then I want to spill them out into the box, have them, then they go back into the bags. How many missions can you play in a single session? I find if we're doing a 4 or 5 hour play session, and you're like, Fritz, that's nothing. We do that all the time. 4 or 5 hour play session, we can get about 3. And that's at a 3 or 4, about 3. If I had to throw a number out there, it would be 3. Sometimes 4 if we push it a little bit. But that's at a relaxed pace. That's at enjoying the game. That's at making decisions in the dungeon. Tactically, what are we going to do? Adding a little bit of light role play on there, going back to Gloomhaven and looking at the purchase deck and kind of really thinking and strategizing and talking. So in a larger game session, yes. I believe you could, once you get into the flow of knowing how to set things up, You can do one mission, unless it's some of the larger dungeons or boss encounter with a story arcs, but just an average mission. I think you could do that in about an hour. So figure 15 minutes setup, 15 minutes breakdown or so, because whatever system you have, you do want to get back correctly. You could play it in about 2 hours on there. And I think that's pretty reasonable, given not only the content, but the complexability of the game and all the decisions that the game allows you to make.